members, and welcome back to Larp 101. So let's get straight on to this week's topic. I got a lovely question about a month ago, which I have been dying to answer. What have been some of your favourite characters so far, whether they're your own or someone else's? Also, how do you develop a good character? I'd love to know your process. So I want to go into my favourite characters at some point. But I want to first address the second part of this question, which is how you build a good character. Now, I've used a few different methods for building characters in the past. My favourite has always been my 5-3-2-1 method, which I've mentioned in this video and this video. But I have a new character to build for Empire LARP in the UK, and that means I wanted to try something different. So I found a new method, which I am going to show you right now. And what I want as an experiment is I want to see if any of you guys are willing to try it. And if you are, to tell me about your characters after you've built them. I'm expanding my social media. I'm already on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, but I've also now got a Facebook page. And there I'll be posting up my character build that I've built from this process. And if you guys are willing to follow me and share your character builds, I would be so excited to read all about them. So come like my page on Facebook and let's talk about character builds. So what is this character build idea that I wanted to try out? Well, I've always been kind of intrigued by the concept of the confession album. If you don't know what a confession album is, it was something that was popular during the 19th century here in Britain. And essentially it was a series of questions that you would answer about your own personality. And it would essentially give people a really in-depth look at who you and essentially what your soul is made of. What kind of questions these albums ask you do vary from person to person. It can be things about your favourite types of profession, your favourite flower, favourite colour. Basically the kind of thing that you would write about characters when you were making stuff up when you were 10, 11, 12. You know, my character's name is this. They'll have blue eyes. They like the colour purple. They like to read and pet animals in their spare time. It's essentially that, but a bit more complicated. And the one that I really, really wanted to try is something called the Proust questionnaire. The Proust questionnaire was invented by a gentleman called Marcel Proust. Marcel Proust was a French novelist from the 1800s, and he said that he came up with a set of questions that he believed gave the most in-depth look at someone's personality possible. And I'm talking 35 questions, and they are not easy to answer. And rather than taking this as a personality quiz about myself, because I really don't need to get to know myself that much at all, but I do want to get to know a character that way. So what I did was I got myself a scrapbook, a nice one with lots and lots of blank pages, and I decided to separate it up into sections. I didn't necessarily go for 1 page per question because at the end of the day, I felt that this would be a really good tool for character development in general, and I wanted to have some spare pages in case this character developed further the more I played them. So 35 different sections, and in them I wrote down the gist of what each question was, just in pencil, and then I started trying to answer as many of them as I possibly could about this character. So the character's name is Turn Ash River. She is from the nation of Navarre from the Empire. Truthfully, she started off as a semi-throwaway character that I made for my one visit to Empire because I wasn't really certain I was going to go back, wasn't really sure if I was going to like the nation I was in. I just wanted to have someone to play that essentially would be throwaway for a weekend. So I gave her some basic skills, I got some nice little kit for her, and I didn't write a backstory for her at all. And I now regret it really badly and really want to create something for her. So like I said, there's 35 questions. I did not necessarily answer these questions in order because I felt like some of them were harder to answer than others, especially when you're building a character from scratch. But the ultimate goal was to see if I could build a character background from personality scraps. So the first question to be asked on the Proust questionnaire is, what is your idea of perfect happiness? Which I think is probably one of the harshest questions anyone can ever be asked, because the idea of what would make you perfectly happy is often incredibly complex, but your brain tries to think of it as something simple, which naturally means that I overthought it massively. But I persisted, and I essentially decided that I wanted Turn to be a family person, and that her family and the people that she lived with would essentially be the thing that she built her life around. So I did a beautiful sketch of her family just camping in the forest together, and it's just sitting around, eating food, playing with each other. Her perfect happiness would be her family being together. And then the second question it immediately asks you is, what is your greatest fear? Which I didn't think I really quite understood, because it's like, is she like scared of snakes or, bears or something like that? So I thought about it long and hard, and all I could really think was, well, if her greatest happiness is being with her family and being in that close-knit group, the only thing that could really spark true fear in her would be if she was without them. And that's when I decided that my character has a deep, deep fear of being left alone. Which sparked another question. Why is she so desperate for a family, and why would she hate being alone? Which ultimately led to a plot point for her that I didn't really think of, which was essentially that she must have been born alone. Being alone must have been the first thing that she was ever aware of. So I decided that the first point of her story would be that one day she woke up in the woods alone. An adult, by herself, with no conscious memory of anything before that. Loneliness was the first thing that she ever felt, and she hated it. Now, as to why she was left in the woods alone and she doesn't remember anything before that, that's not been decided yet, but it's an excellent place to start. And there are so many other questions to ask as well. Things like, what kind of qualities do you hate in other people? What kind of qualities do you hate in yourself? What kind of things do you love about yourself? What kind of talent do you wish that you had? I decided that she has to be a musician. I've never played a musician at Larp. I'm a terrible musician in general, but I have been learning to play the ocarina for a little bit. I am not good at it. Thank you to every ocarina player / tutor that's on TikTok and YouTube. Your efforts are greatly appreciated. I suck so badly. But I wanted to have that in my personality. Like, I thought that would be something interesting. Like, why would she want to even play an instrument? What is it about music that draws her? And maybe music would be the thing that drew her to people for the first time. Maybe the family she has found and built for herself are musicians. And some of these questions are like super intense as well. Like question 23 is, what do you consider to be the absolute lowest depths of misery? I don't know. What could my character imagine would make someone more miserable than anything else? I can't use being alone, because that's essentially what I've decided my greatest fear is. So what do I think someone would make somebody so miserable? And the only thing I could really think of would be as if you just weren't allowed to go back home again. Not that you were just alone, but that there was something stopping you from going back to that place where you felt warm and secure and safe, and you just couldn't return. Which made me think a bit about the general backstory of the Navarre from Empire and how they are constantly battling the Malorn, which has overcome part of their cities and their forests. And if something like that had taken over my home and I couldn't go back to the places that I loved and the places that were a part of me because of something dark and evil and mysterious, that would make someone pretty miserable. So she would probably have a deeply ingrained, probably a hatred for the Verlawn and what they've done to the forest that she called home. It's a lot of really in-depth thinking, and I've never quite used a questionnaire like this to try and build something quite deep and profound from, basically nothing. It's certainly a really interesting way of building a character, and I think it will help me in portraying this particular one because she comes from somewhere with a deep backstory that I can build into my own. So will this kind of character build help me play my character at the events? I certainly think so. I think knowing a character incredibly in depth does help, though I do think it is still important that my character has room to grow. I don't believe that characters should be static, and I don't believe that every aspect of a character's personality should be developed before a game even starts. Because essentially part of the joy of LARP is character development. You take a character, you put them in a situation, and you see how that changes them as a person. I think that when you have characters that don't grow, it's really easy to become stagnant. It's really easy to become bored. And it kind of sucks all the fun out of essentially some amazing roleplay. I think there are benefits to knowing a character really, really well and having that in-depth knowledge of who they are and how they would be expected to respond to things. I think it can probably be a lot to remember. So I don't think I would personally recommend this method for one-shot games where you're only going to be playing that character one time. I think it's going to be a lot to remember. I think it's a lot of extra depth that you don't necessarily need, because the odds of it coming up in a game that's only going to be a few days long and then never played again is probably a bit of a waste of time. But if you're planning on playing a character at a event that's going to be running over weeks, months, years, then having that kind of in-depth character build, especially if you've got large gaps in between games as well, like I do. Some of the games I go to have 6 to 8 months between games over the winter period, because very few people want to, LARP in fields in the freezing cold. So I think when you've got that kind of large gap between games, having an in-depth understanding of who your character is and who they are is probably going to be very beneficial. So yeah, I would recommend this method if you're going to be playing a character long term. In terms of short-term one-off characters, I'm still looking for a character build at the moment that I think will work quite well for it. I tried to come up with a decent character build for the Goblin Ball, which I went to back in October. The video for that is linked below. I recommend you watch it because it is actually quite an interesting experience. But truthfully, my character build for that event was quite weak. Not only because I had a short amount of time, which is understandable, late tickets are late tickets, but also because I just couldn't come up with a concept that I felt strongly about. And essentially, time ran out and I had to come up with something very basic, which, while I enjoyed the event, I didn't necessarily enjoy playing them. So I want to try some things out and see if I can come up with some method for some short-term character builds. If you have any recommendations, please let me know, because I want to try them out very, very much. If you want to know more about my character from Empire and how I use the Proust questionnaire to essentially build her, I've now posted that up on Facebook, along with some pictures from my scrapbook, so you can see exactly what I did. I really recommend that you go on there, follow me, and then add your own Proust questionnaire answers as well for the characters that you've built, and we can compare. See if we've come up with anything interesting. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Hope you're staying happy and healthy, and I will see you on a battlefield soon.